She was fired for feeding a stray, but an hour later, the CEO her bosses feared landed his helicopter in her yard. The piercing thrum of rotor blades shattered the frigid stillness of the winter afternoon, growing rapidly from a distant hum to a deafening roar. Elara Davies, still reeling from the shock of her dismissal, clutched the threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders, her breath frosting in the air as she stared at the sky above her modest, snow-dusted yard. It seemed the very heavens were conspiring against her, adding insult to the injury of her abrupt unemployment. She had just returned from the Sterling Philanthropic Foundation, where her heart, still warm from a selfless act, had been summarily broken by the cold, calculating words of her employers. A biting wind whipped stray snowflakes across her face, mirroring the sting in her eyes. Her small, humble home, a testament to a life lived on the margins, felt suddenly colder, emptier. The future, moments ago uncertain, now loomed as an impenetrable, terrifying void. Then, from behind the last vestiges of a dying sun, a sleek, black helicopter, a marvel of modern engineering, descended with an almost predatory grace. Its powerful downdraft whipped the snow into a furious, swirling vortex, obscuring the skeletal branches of the ancient oak at the edge of her yard. It hovered for a moment, a magnificent, intimidating beast, before settling gently onto the ground, its powerful engines winding down to a low, ominous purr that vibrated through the frozen earth. Elara's eyes widened, a flicker of bewildered fear replacing her earlier despair. Who on earth would land a private helicopter in her yard? And why now, on the worst day of her life, when her world had already crumbled? The absurdity of the scene was almost too much to bear. Before she could even process the surreal sight, the pilot's door swung open with a soft hiss, and a figure emerged. He was an elderly man, yet he moved with an unmistakable aura of power, his tailored suit stark against the pristine snow. His gaze, sharp and commanding, swept across the small, snow-dusted property, taking in every detail of her humble existence, then landed directly on Elara, who stood frozen in place, a tiny, vulnerable silhouette against the vastness of the winter sky. Behind him, emerging from the opulent interior of their luxury car which had just pulled up, stood Caspian Sterling and Serafina Thorne, their faces a mixture of smug satisfaction at Elara's misery and irritated curiosity at the unexpected, audacious arrival. The cold air crackled with unspoken tension. The elderly man took a deliberate step forward, his polished shoes crunching softly on the snow. His voice, when it came, cut through the frosty air with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. It was deep, resonant, and carried an undeniable weight of authority, a sound that commanded immediate attention. The game, he declared, his eyes fixed on Elara, a flicker of something unreadable within their depths, then sweeping with withering contempt towards Caspian and Serafina, who now stood aghast, is officially over. Caspian, ever the picture of entitled arrogance, scoffed, a sneer twisting his perfect features. His expensive scarf, carelessly draped, seemed to mock the threadbare shawl Elara clutched. "Excuse me, old man. Do you have any idea whose property you've just trespassed on? And who exactly are you to declare any game over?" His voice was laced with a disdain that was both dismissive and impatient. Serafina, equally haughty, her designer handbag clutched tightly, pulled out her phone, her fingers already contemplating calling security, the insolence of the stranger unbearable. They had no idea the man standing before them held the very strings of their meticulously constructed, fragile universe. They saw only an impertinent stranger, oblivious to the profound irony of the scene unfolding before them. The old man, their grandfather, the founder of their world, had truly brought the curtain down. The air seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Sterling Blackwood, at a formidable 78 years of age, was a titan among men, a living legend whose name was synonymous with innovation, wealth, and, to a select few, philanthropy. His empire, Blackwood Holdings, was a sprawling labyrinth of tech giants, real estate portfolios, and a philanthropic arm that, on paper, promised to uplift the less fortunate. Yet, for all his material success, Sterling found himself adrift in a sea of profound disillusionment. His world, once vibrant with the thrill of creation and genuine connection, had become a gilded cage, teeming with sycophants, opportunists, and, most painfully, his own flesh and blood, all circling like vultures around his colossal fortune. A deep weariness had settled in his bones, not from age, but from the spiritual emptiness he perceived around him. The rot, he had observed with increasing despair, had set in years ago. His only surviving heir, his grandson Caspian Sterling, was a meticulously groomed facade of ambition and entitlement. Every gesture, every perfectly articulated sentence, seemed designed for public consumption, devoid of genuine feeling. Alongside him was Serafina Thorne, Caspian's fiancée, whose ruthlessness was only matched by her insatiable greed. She possessed an unnerving ability to calculate the cost-benefit of every human interaction, her eyes always seeking advantage. They were, ostensibly, at the helm of the Sterling Philanthropic Foundation, a division of Blackwood Holdings meant to be Sterling's enduring legacy of compassion. But Sterling, with his keen eye for true character, had long suspected it was nothing more than a meticulously crafted PR facade, a vehicle for cost-cutting, self-aggrandizement, and, ultimately, personal gain. He had witnessed Caspian dismiss a plea for emergency medical aid for a single mother with a callous wave of his hand, muttering about resource allocation and setting precedents that might open the floodgates. The woman, desperate and tearful, had been ushered out by security, her pleas echoing in the sterile hallways. He had overheard Serafina complain about the waste of providing nutritious meals, suggesting cheaper, less wholesome alternatives to save a few pennies, her perfectly manicured finger tapping an Excel sheet, all while planning a lavish, charity gala that seemed to benefit only their own social standing, a grotesque display of wealth masquerading as benevolence. The foundation, his dream, was being hollowed out from within. The final straw, the precipice that pushed Sterling to embark on his audacious personal quest, had come during a mundane family dinner at his sprawling estate. The crystal chandeliers gleamed, the silverware clinked against fine china, but the air was thick with a chilling indifference. Caspian, emboldened by vintage wine and the perceived safety of their exclusive dining room, had openly mocked the unwashed masses, who depended on the foundation, calling them drains on society and professional beggars, who would take a mile if you give them an inch. Serafina had chimed in with a sneer about the emotional labor required to pretend to care, rolling her eyes at the notion of genuine empathy. Sterling had listened, his heart aching with a profound sense of failure. This was his legacy. This was what his life's work had wrought. A bitter taste filled his mouth, more potent than the most expensive wine. He had built an empire, but had he lost his soul, and in doing so, had he inadvertently nurtured monsters? The thought was unbearable. He knew then that his will, that monumental document that would dictate the future of his empire, could not be finalized without a true understanding of those around him. He needed to see human nature unfiltered, stripped of the pretense that wealth and power often inspired. He needed to know who, if anyone, truly embodied genuine compassion, not just for show, but for the sake of kindness itself, without expectation of reward or recognition. He craved authenticity, a commodity rarer than gold in his insulated world. And so, the plan was meticulously conceived, a clandestine operation shrouded in secrecy. He would disappear, at least from the public eye, and infiltrate his own world, becoming an unregarded shadow, a forgotten man. Sterling Blackwood would become Arthur Finch, a frail, unkempt elderly man, a ghost of his former self. The transformation was an art form in itself, a testament to Sterling's obsessive attention to detail and his profound need for this truth. Weeks were spent with a private prosthetics expert, subtly altering his facial structure with discrete silicone applications, adding realistic wrinkles and age spots, and dulling the sharpness of his eyes with specially tinted contact lenses that gave them a roomy, distant quality. His posture was deliberately slouched, his gait slowed, a subtle tremor introduced to his hands through controlled muscle tension. His wardrobe, once a collection of bespoke suits from London's finest tailors, was replaced by ill-fitting, threadbare clothes, stained and worn, acquired from charity shops. He grew out his usually immaculately trimmed hair and beard, allowing them to become disheveled and matted, streaked with artificial grime. He even practiced a softer, more hesitant voice, shedding the commanding tone that had once moved markets and made men tremble. His once sharp mind, however, remained as keen as ever, hidden behind a veil of feigned senility. He felt a strange sense of liberation in this anonymity, a freedom from the crushing expectations of his identity. A single, utterly trustworthy aide, Miles, a man whose loyalty had been tested over decades, was the only one privy to the full extent of the plan, managing the intricate logistics from a discreet distance, ensuring Sterling's safety while allowing him complete immersion. The irony was not lost on him. The man who owned a global empire would seek menial work or charity at one of his own foundation's soup kitchens and community centers. He would observe, he would listen, and he would judge, unseen and unheard in his new guise. His goal was clear: to determine who was truly worthy of his colossal will, and who was merely a parasite feeding on his legacy, a cancer on the very heart of his dream. The stage was set for a truth that would unravel worlds, a reckoning years in the making. Arthur Finch, the carefully constructed persona of Sterling Blackwood, shuffled through the grand, yet curiously hollow, entrance of the Sterling Philanthropic Foundation. The marble floors gleamed, reflecting the cold light from the towering windows, and the lobby was adorned with expensive, abstract art, all proclaiming an image of prosperity and noble intent. Yet, the air was cold. Despite the heating, the smiles of the few staff members he encountered felt forced, thin veneers over busy indifference, and a pervasive sense of efficiency, bordering on callousness, hung heavy. This was not the vibrant hub of compassion Sterling had envisioned when he first conceived of the foundation. It felt more like a corporate front, sterile and unwelcoming to the very people it claimed to serve, a place where paperwork seemed to matter more than people. Arthur, feigning a slight cough and a tremor in his hand that seemed to emphasize his frailty, approached the reception desk. A young woman, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, but with eyes that seemed to constantly scan for something more important than the person in front of her, barely looked up from her computer screen. "Yes?" she asked, her tone clipped, impatient, clearly indicating a desire to be rid of him swiftly. Arthur, in his new, hesitant voice, explained he was looking for any odd jobs, perhaps some volunteering, or even just a warm meal. The receptionist sighed, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming an irritable rhythm on the polished wood. "Soup kitchens around the back, for beneficiaries. We don't usually hire, especially not walk-ins. Check the bulletin board, I suppose." She gestured vaguely towards a corner bulletin board that was almost entirely empty, save for a faded notice about a staff holiday party from months ago. The dismissal was curt, unfeeling. Arthur merely nodded, his gaze seemingly unfocused, and shuffled away, his heart sinking with each calculated step. He spent his first few days observing from the periphery, a silent, unregarded fixture in the soup kitchen, an invisible ghost. He witnessed the cost-cutting, firsthand, policies that were clearly driven by profit, not compassion. The soup, thin and watery, barely contained any solids, a few lonely vegetables floating like distant islands. The bread, stale and crumbly, seemed designed to fill, not to nourish. The portions were meticulously measured, designed to be just enough to sustain, to ward off immediate hunger, but never to truly nourish, never to bring comfort. He overheard Caspian and Serafina, on a tour of the facility, their voices echoing in the vast dining hall, discussing the impressive reduction in food waste, a chilling euphemism for the meager rations. Caspian, in a hushed but audible tone, complained to Serafina about the overhead of heating the large dining hall, suggesting they only turn it on during peak hours, to avoid unnecessary expenditure. Serafina, ever practical in her avarice, agreed, pointing out with a dismissive wave of her hand that these people are used to the cold anyway. It builds character, doesn't it? Arthur, listening, felt a cold knot of disgust tighten in his stomach. His money, meant to bring warmth and sustenance, was being hoarded and diluted, twisted into a mockery of his true intentions. He saw elderly men shivering, children with chapped lips, all struggling against the pervasive chill. One frigid morning, Arthur, feigning a need to use the restroom, lingered near the kitchen's back entrance, a place where he knew discarded items might be found, a common haunt for the truly desperate. He saw Caspian and Serafina berating a kitchen manager about a recent purchase of fresh vegetables, which they deemed extravagant. The manager, a tired-looking woman named Margaret, her face etched with resignation, tried to explain the nutritional benefits. "We're running a foundation, not a gourmet restaurant." Serafina had snapped, her voice carrying a venomous edge that sliced through the clatter of pots. "Frozen, bulk-bought goods are perfectly adequate. We need to focus on efficiency, not culinary delights for charity cases." Caspian had nodded in agreement, adding, his tone sharp, "Every penny saved here is a penny more for the foundation's future, manager. Think of the optics. Think of the board." The manager simply nodded, defeated, her shoulders slumping. The irony of them using the foundation's future as an excuse for their personal enrichment was a bitter pill for Sterling to swallow. He felt a profound sense of violation, as if his very soul was being desecrated. It was during these pervasive observations that Arthur's attention was drawn to Alara Davies. She was a quiet, unassuming woman in her late 30s, one of the low-level kitchen staff, her hands often chapped from the cold water, her face etched with a quiet weariness that spoke of a life of unseen struggles. Yet, unlike the other staff members who seemed resigned or even apathetic, merely going through the motions, Alara moved with a gentle diligence, a quiet purpose. She would often sneak an extra ladle of soup into a particularly frail beneficiary's bowl when no one was looking, her movements swift and discreet, or offer a genuinely warm smile, a rare commodity in this sterile environment. She always spoke to the beneficiaries with respect, calling them by name, listening to their small complaints or stories, even when others ignored them or merely tolerated their presence. She saw them as individuals, not just statistics. One afternoon, as Arthur sat hunched over a meager bowl of soup, observing, he saw Alara wipe down a table with a tenderness that struck him, as if she were polishing a cherished antique rather than a utilitarian surface. Later, he saw her, during a brief break, discreetly hand a small, leftover pastry, slightly squashed but still wholesome, to a shivering child who had been denied a second helping by a stricter colleague. It was a small act, almost imperceptible, hidden in the bustling activity of the kitchen, but it spoke volumes about her character. Arthur found himself subtly maneuvering to be near her, not speaking much as Arthur Finch, maintaining his persona of a quiet, somewhat confused old man, but simply observing her unwavering kindness amidst the pervasive coldness and cynicism that permeated the foundation. She even offered him, the unkempt old man, a slightly larger portion of bread one day, whispering, "You look like you could use it, dear." Her eyes held no judgment, only genuine concern, a spark of pure humanity in a place that had become so devoid of it. This was the person Sterling was searching for, the embodiment of the values he so desperately wanted to preserve. The climax of Arthur's observation, and the ultimate catalyst for Sterling's final decision, occurred on an especially brutal winter day. The wind howled, whipping snow into biting flurries that stung the skin, and the temperatures plummeted far below freezing, making every breath a painful gulp of icy air. Arthur had just finished his shift, mostly pushing a broom around the nearly empty dining hall, his feigned senility allowing him to be largely ignored, when he saw it. A pitiful, emaciated stray dog, its fur matted and thin, shivered violently by the back entrance of the kitchen, huddled against the cold brick wall, its ribs starkly visible through its skin. It whimpered, a sound of profound misery that seemed to cut through the cold air and pierce Sterling's very soul. Alara, on her way to dispose of a small bin of perfectly usable, though technically leftover, scraps from the day's meal, things like the ends of bread loaves, untouched vegetable trimmings, and a small amount of congealed stew that wouldn't be reused according to the Foundation's strict waste protocols, paused. Her eyes, filled with immediate sympathy, softened as they fell upon the suffering creature. A moment of internal debate might have occurred, between rules and empathy, but her natural compassion overriding any corporate protocol, she knelt down without a moment's hesitation. She carefully selected a few pieces of bread and a spoonful of stew, placed them on a discarded paper plate, and gently slid it towards the dog, murmuring soft, comforting words. The animal, hesitant at first, its gaze fearful, then ravenous with hunger, devoured the offering in seconds, its tail giving a weak, grateful wag, a tiny gesture of profound thanks. Elara stroked its head softly, her face a picture of pure, selfless mercy, a warmth emanating from her that defied the freezing air. It was at that precise, poignant moment that Caspian Sterling and Serafina Thorne, having just finished an unscheduled inspection of the kitchen's waste management protocols, rounded the corner. Their eyes, sharp and predatory, instantly fixed on Elara and the dog, their faces hardening with immediate disapproval. "What in the blazes do you think you're doing, Davies?" Caspian's voice was a whip-crack of outrage, echoing off the cold brick walls, shattering the quiet moment of kindness. Serafina's eyes narrowed, glittering with an almost gleeful malice as she recognized that a misuse of resources. "Is that food? From our kitchen? Are you feeding a stray dog with company resources?" Her voice rose in pitch, shrill with indignation. Elara flinched, rising slowly, her face paling as if the blood had drained from it. "It was just a few leftovers, Mr. Sterling. The poor thing was freezing, starving. It was going to be thrown out anyway." Her voice was barely a whisper, laced with desperation. "Thrown out, not given out," Serafina interjected, her voice now a cutting accusation. "This is a foundation, not a personal pet shelter. This is misuse of company resources, Davies. Gross unprofessional conduct. It sets a terrible precedent. What if everyone starts feeding every stray that wanders onto our property? The costs would be astronomical." Her logic was cold, unyielding, entirely devoid of empathy. Caspian, eager to assert his authority and perhaps impress Serafina with his ruthlessness, stepped forward, his posture rigid with self-importance. "Serafina is absolutely right, Davies. This is unacceptable. We have strict policies against such actions. You are hereby terminated. Effective immediately. Clean out your locker." The words were delivered with a chilling finality, devoid of any human consideration. Elara stared at them, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief, then filling with tears that threatened to spill. But it was just a little food, for a dying animal." Her voice broke, her spirit visibly shattering. "No buts." Caspian snapped, his face contorted in a mask of self-righteous fury, a twisted pleasure in wielding his power. "You're fired. Get out." He gestured dismissively towards the exit, as if swatting away a fly. Arthur Finch, hidden in the shadows of the back entrance, a silent, unseen witness, watched the entire, horrifying tableau unfold. He saw Elara, her shoulders slumped, her spirit crushed, turn and walk away, leaving the meager warmth of the kitchen for the biting cold of unemployment, all for an act of pure, unadulterated compassion. He saw Caspian and Serafina exchange satisfied glances, their faces devoid of any empathy, believing they had successfully reasserted their authority and saved the foundation from a few pennies worth of misused food. They walked away, their steps confident, leaving Elara's broken spirit in their wake. In that stark, chilling moment, Sterling Blackwood's test was complete. The contrast was blinding, a revelation that pierced through years of self-deception and doubt. Elara Davies, a woman of humble means, perhaps struggling herself, had shown a depth of humanity that dwarfed the vast fortunes of his heirs. Her simple act of mercy, costing nothing but a moment of her time and a few scraps, shone brighter than all the polished marble and meticulously crafted PR campaigns of the Sterling Philanthropic Foundation. His conviction was solidified, unshakable. The cold cruelty of Caspian and Serafina, their utter disdain for the vulnerable, whether human or animal, had sealed their fate. They were not merely misguided, they were fundamentally corrupt, their hearts hardened by greed. Arthur Finch turned, a steely resolve settling into his eyes, replacing the feigned frailty, and walked out of the Foundation, his test now a prelude to a dramatic and definitive intervention. The air thrummed with a palpable tension in Alara Davies' small, snow-covered yard. The black helicopter, a symbol of unimaginable power, sat silently, its rotors motionless, a colossal metal bird of prey that seemed to mock the humble setting. Alara, still clutching the now-fed stray dog close to her, its small body a comforting warmth against her trembling hands, could only stare, a tremor running through her. Her mind struggled to comprehend the surreal turn of events. Caspian and Serafina, having arrived in their luxury sedan moments before the helicopter, looked on with a mixture of annoyance and growing unease, their initial smugness replaced by confusion. Who was this man, and why had he intruded on their moment of triumph over a disobedient employee? The elderly man, Sterling Blackwood, now standing tall and commanding, shed every vestige of Arthur Finch. The subtle prosthetics had been removed moments before his descent, and his eyes, no longer clouded by feigned frailty, gleamed with an unnerving intensity, reflecting the cold light of the winter afternoon. He turned his gaze, first to Alara, a hint of something akin to admiration in his expression, then, with devastating coldness, to Caspian and Serafina. Caspian, Sterling began, his voice resonating with an authority that left no room for doubt, a familiar tone that should have sent a chill down his grandson's spine. Serafina. I believe you just made a rather significant decision regarding Miss Davies' employment. Caspian, still attempting to recover his composure, straightened his expensive coat, a nervous tick now noticeable in his jaw. Grandfather? What in the world are you doing here? This is highly irregular. And what are you talking about? We merely dismissed an employee for gross misuse of company resources. A necessary measure for the Foundation's integrity. You know how important that is. Serafina nodded vigorously, a defiant glint in her eyes, trying to project an air of righteous indignation. A humorless laugh escaped Sterling's lips, a sound that held no mirth, only profound disappointment. Integrity? You speak of integrity? You, who have systematically stripped my Foundation of its very soul. You, who have valued profit margins over human dignity, and callous efficiency over compassion. His voice rose, carrying the weight of years of silent observation, of deep-seated betrayal. Do you truly not recognize me, Caspian? Serafina? He let the question hang in the frigid air, thick with unspoken accusations. He paused, letting the question sink in, watching their faces for a flicker of recognition, a dawning comprehension. Caspian frowned, a vague sense of unease creeping into his meticulously ordered world, a dawning realization that something was terribly wrong. Recognize you? You're my grandfather, of course, but what does that have to do with? No, Sterling cut him off, his voice now a thunderclap that seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. Not Sterling Blackwood. Do you recognize Arthur Finch? The words hit them like a physical blow. Caspian's jaw dropped, his face draining of color, leaving it ashen and slack. Serafina gasped, her perfectly made-up face contorting in dawning horror, her eyes widening in a grotesque parody of shock. They remembered the frail, unkempt old man, the one they had dismissed, ignored, and patronized. The one Caspian had almost tripped over in the hallway, muttering, "Get out of the way, old-timer," with a dismissive shove. The one Serafina had openly sneered at for asking for an extra slice of bread, muttering about freeloaders. The blood rushed from their faces as a horrifying realization dawned. The man they had treated with such contempt, the one they had believed to be a mere charity case, a nobody, was the very man who held their entire future in his hands. The irony was a cruel, crushing weight. Yes, Sterling continued, his voice dripping with icy contempt, each word a hammer blow to their carefully constructed facades. Arthur Finch. The old-timer you nearly ran over, Caspian. The beggar you scoffed at, Serafina, for daring to ask for a warm meal. I have been among you, observing, listening, seeing your true colors shine through the veneer of your carefully constructed philanthropy. His gaze locked onto Caspian, then Serafina, piercing their very souls. I witnessed every callous decision, every penny you diverted for your own lavish lifestyles, every act of contempt you showed towards the very people this foundation was meant to serve. And I watched today, as you fired Ms. Davies for the most profound act of pure compassion I have witnessed in years. He turned back to Alara, his stern expression softening slightly, a rare warmth entering his eyes. Ms. Davies, your act of kindness, your simple, human mercy towards a suffering creature, shone like a beacon in the darkness of their greed. It solidified for me what I needed to know, the absolute truth of who you are versus who they are. He then gestured towards the black helicopter, its stillness now a symbol of immense, quiet power. Consider this my intervention. And the start of a new chapter, not just for you, but for the very soul of Blackwood Holdings. Caspian, finding his voice, stammered, his usual composure utterly shattered. Grandfather, this is a misunderstanding. We were merely enforcing policy. You don't understand the complexities of running a foundation of this scale. The regulations, the budgeting. He trailed off, his words hollow. Sterling merely raised a hand, silencing him with a gesture that conveyed more power than any shouted word, more authority than any decree. Oh, I understand the complexities perfectly, Caspian. I built this empire. Every brick, every innovation, every connection. And I see now that I must rebuild its heart, its true purpose. And it will not be with you. The fallout from Sterling Blackwood's dramatic revelation was swift, brutal, and utterly devastating for Caspian Sterling and Serafina Thorne. The helicopter landing in Alara Davies' yard was merely the opening salvo in a meticulously orchestrated campaign of justice that had been years in the making. Within hours, the news, fueled by the sheer spectacle of the event and Sterling Blackwood's legendary status, began to leak. Whispers turned to headlines, and headlines erupted into a full-blown scandal that rocked the philanthropic world and the upper echelons of society. The carefully guarded secrets of the Sterling Philanthropic Foundation were about to be laid bare. Sterling acted with the precision of a seasoned general executing a perfectly planned assault. From the moment he stepped out of that helicopter, his legal team, already on standby, fully briefed and armed with irrefutable evidence collected by Miles and his discreet network, was set into motion. Within the hour, Caspian and Serafina received immediate termination notices from Blackwood Holdings, not just from their roles at the foundation, but from every board position, every subsidiary, every single corporate affiliation they held. Their corporate credit cards were frozen, their company cars impounded from their lavish residences, their access to corporate assets revoked with a chilling, surgical efficiency. Their entire financial support system evaporated as if it had never existed. A full, forensic audit of the Sterling Philanthropic Foundation was announced, publicly and unequivocally, led by a fiercely independent team of investigators. Sterling Blackwood, in a rare, scathing press conference, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority, detailed his undercover investigation, exposing Caspian and Serafina's systemic mismanagement, their callous disregard for beneficiaries, and the outright embezzlement of funds for personal luxuries. Receipts, meticulously collected by Sterling, as Arthur Finch, and his hidden team, detailing lavish vacations to exotic locales, exorbitant personal shopping sprees at exclusive boutiques, and designer goods purchased on the foundation's dime, were leaked to the press, accompanied by damning photos. Their carefully constructed image of benevolent philanthropists shattered into a million pieces, revealing the grotesque greed beneath. Caspian and Serafina found themselves ostracized almost overnight. Friends vanished, fair-weather acquaintances evaporated, social invitations ceased, and their names became synonymous with greed and deceit. The public outcry was immense, fueled by the stark contrast of Alara Davies' simple, profound act of kindness against their calculated cruelty and years of pretense. They faced potential legal charges, not just for mismanagement, but for fraud and embezzlement, as the audit uncovered deeper layers of financial impropriety and corruption that shocked even hardened cynics. Their trust funds, once seemingly unassailable, were either frozen pending legal action or significantly diminished by Sterling, who had complete control over the terms of his initial bequests, having structured them with clauses that protected against gross misconduct. Their dreams of inheriting a vast empire dissolved into a nightmare of public humiliation and financial ruin, leaving them scrambling for relevance, utterly stripped of the power and privilege they had so ruthlessly exploited. They became pariahs, forced to reckon with the consequences of their actions in a world that no longer bowed to their name. For Alara Davies, the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Still in a state of bewildered shock, her mind struggling to process the enormity of the shift, she listened as Sterling Blackwood, his voice now imbued with genuine warmth, offered her not just her job back, but a position she could never have dreamed of. He appointed her the director of a new philanthropic division of Blackwood Holdings, one dedicated purely to genuine compassion and community uplift, completely separate from the tarnished Sterling Philanthropic Foundation, which was quickly restructured and placed under the management of an independent, highly ethical board chosen by Sterling himself. "Miss Davies," Sterling had said, a genuine smile gracing his lips, his eyes reflecting a newfound peace. "Your heart is the true gold, the most valuable asset I have found in this endeavor. I want you to build this new foundation, guided by your unwavering kindness, by your innate sense of what is right and truly compassionate. You will have all the resources you need, without the bureaucratic nonsense or the cynical oversight. And as a personal gesture of my profound gratitude, for reminding me that true humanity still exists, for being the beacon I sought," he continued, gesturing towards her small, modest home, its snow-dusted roof now seeming to gleam with a promise, "I have arranged for this property to be fully paid off, and a substantial trust fund established in your name, to ensure your financial security for the rest of your life. This is not charity, Alara. This is recognition. Recognition of true merit, true character, a reward for the quiet decency that the world so desperately needs." Alara, overwhelmed, could only stammer her thanks, tears streaming down her face, tears not of despair, but of profound relief and gratitude. She looked at the stray dog, still by her side, its eyes now bright and its fur surprisingly clean, already thriving under her gentle care. She realized that the simplest act of kindness, born of a pure heart, had indeed changed everything, not just for her, but for many others who would now benefit from true compassion. The dog, whom she named Hope, became her constant companion, a living testament to the day her life had been irrevocably, wonderfully altered by a hidden hand of justice. Months later, the dust had settled, and the harsh grip of winter's snow had given way to the gentle embrace of spring. Sterling Blackwood, no longer feeling the crushing weight of disillusionment that had plagued his final years, found a profound sense of purpose and peace. He spent his days closely involved with Alara's new philanthropic endeavors, witnessing firsthand the tangible good being done, the lives genuinely touched, without the pretense or the greed that had once infected his legacy. He had found what he sought, not just an heir to his wealth, but an heir to his true values, a guardian of the compassion he believed his empire should embody. His colossal will, once a source of bitter contemplation and cynical calculation, was now finalized, meticulously ensuring that his fortune would serve the greater good, managed by those with pure intentions. He had found true connection, not in the opulent boardrooms or the grand galas, but in the quiet, humble acts of kindness he had observed as Arthur Finch, a simple man among the struggling masses. Alara Davies, thriving in her new role, brought an unprecedented level of empathy and efficiency to the reformed foundation. She transformed it into a genuine sanctuary, a place where dignity was restored, and needs were truly met, where human warmth was prioritized over balance sheets. Her life, once marked by quiet struggle and unseen efforts, was now filled with purpose and prosperity, yet her inherent kindness remained unchanged, a beacon of integrity that inspired everyone around her. Hope, the stray dog, now healthy and playful, a loyal and loving companion, often accompanied her to the foundation, a gentle, furry reminder of the act that had set everything in motion, the ripple effect of a single, selfless gesture. Caspian Sterling and Serafina Thorne, stripped of their wealth and social standing, faded into obscurity, their names forever tarnished by the scandal. Their lavish lifestyles had crumbled, replaced by the grim reality of legal battles, the crushing weight of public scorn, and the cold indifference of a world that no longer valued their superficial charm. They had learned, in the harshest possible way, that true power was not measured in dollars or titles, but in the immutable currency of character, a currency they had squandered. This story, like countless others hidden beneath the surface of everyday life, serves as a poignant reminder that character truly reveals itself not in the blinding glare of prosperity, but in the quiet, often overlooked, shadows of adversity. It is in these moments, when no one is watching, when the cost of compassion seems high, that the genuine warmth of the human spirit shines brightest. And while the world often rewards the cunning and the ruthless, the universe, in its own mysterious way, always ensures that kindness, in its purest form, finds its most extraordinary and unexpected reward. If this incredible story of unexpected justice and profound compassion touched your heart, remember to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more tales that reveal the hidden truths of humanity. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next video. What was your favorite moment of Sterling's grand reveal? What do you think Caspian and Serafina deserved for their actions? Have you ever witnessed an act of kindness that changed everything? Share your thoughts and your own experiences in the comments below. We love hearing from you.